Today's Quran that is read in most of the Muslim world is called the Hafs recitation. Around 97% of all Muslims recite this version of the Quran. Other versions of the Quran are from the 10 recognized reciters. Each of them have their own set of student transmitters from which more versions of the Quran are derived, namely Warsh, Qalun, Al-Bazzi, Qumbul, Ad-Duri, As-Susi, Hisham, Ibn Dakwan, Shu'ba, Khalaf, Khallad, Al-Layth, Isa ibn Wardan, Ibn Jummaz, Ruwais, Ruh, Ishaq and Idris. Note, none of these versions from their respective transmitters are identical recitations of the Quran to another, as each one has variations in either recitation rules called tajweed, word differences in their recitation, different morphology, namely form of the word creating different meanings, or extra letters or words. In addition to the 10 recognized or canonical modes, there are 4 other modes of Quran recitation. These are Ibn Muhaysin, Al-Yazidi, Al-Hasan and Al-A'mash. These recitations are called shaz or odd and so are not recognized. So in all, the number of Arabic Quran versions total to over 30 different versions. Why these variations came about was because early manuscripts of the Quran did not use diacritics either for vowels, harakat, nor dots, i'jam, to distinguish the different vowels of the writing rasm. The rasm in black was the only script found in the earliest surviving fragments of the Quran. I'jam or nuqat al-i'jam, examples in red, was added in later Arabic so that consonant letters could be distinguished. Harakat, examples in blue, indicate short vowels which have been used in the Quran but not in most written Arabic. When Uthman made copies of the Quran, he attempted to do so according to one style, harf. This word is a singular of ahruf. He was supposed to have standardized it to that of the dialect of the Quraysh, Muhammad's tribe. In Islam, the honest truth, the distinction between ahruf and qiraat is explained in detail. At any rate, Uthman's Quran was without the dots and vowel points, so this still allowed other recitations to be accommodated. So people started to criticize one another for reciting differently. Gradual steps were taken to improve the orthography of the Quran. First, the dots were added to distinguish similarly shaped consonants, followed by harakat to indicate different vowels. A figure by the name of Abu Aswad ad-Duwali was instrumental in this endeavour. Islamic tradition honours him as the father of Arabic grammar. Before the variations were finally committed entirely to writing, the Quran was preserved by recitation passed down from one or more prominent reciters of a style of narration who had memorized the Quran, known as Hafiz or Qari, reciter. It developed during the period of the Tabi'un, approximately 650 to 797 AD. The Tabi'un were the generation who did not live during the lifetime of Muhammad. Rather, they lived at the time of the companions of Muhammad. So the main reciters of the Quran, i.e. the Tabi'un, would have received their Quranic teachings second hand. Nonetheless, these reciters became renowned as teachers of Quranic recitation in cities such as Mecca, Medina, Kufa, Basra and Greater Syria, Sham. They attracted students from all over the expanding Muslim state, and their modes of recitations were then attached to their names. It is therefore commonly said, for example, someone recites according to the reading of Asim. However, for the Muslims, this did not mean that these reciters are the originators of these recitations, simply that their own recitation goes back to the prophetic mode of recitation through an unbroken, authenticated chain. Authenticated here means there are no gaps, nor any liars or people of dubious character within this chain of transmission, otherwise it is rejected. There are several problems with the Islamic narrative. Firstly, the Tabi'un did not hear the Quran directly from Muhammad. Secondly, even if it is claimed they heard it from the companions of Muhammad, as evidenced in part 1 of these video series, the companions themselves disagreed and disputed about the Quran. Thirdly, the definition of a companion is disputed. This is explained in the book Islam the Honest Truth. Therefore, the definition of what is a tabi'un cannot be stated with any certainty. Finally, there is a problem of authentication of the transmission of the Quran, as it comes from dubious sources, as will be evidenced shortly in this video. From all the different versions of the Quran, one particular Quran recitation that has reached overwhelming popularity is the Hafs version. This was brought on by the standard Egyptian edition of the Quran, first published on 10th of July 1924 in Cairo. Its publication was seen as a terrific success, and the edition has been described as the official text of the Quran, so popular among both Sunni and Shia Muslims that the common belief among less well-informed Muslims is that the Quran has a single, unambiguous reading, namely this 1924 Cairo edition. Further, the mass-produced printing press increased the availability of the written Quran, but also made this one version widespread at the expense of diversity of the other Quran recitations. The original goal of the Egyptian government in publishing the edition may not have been to delegitimize the other Quran recitations, but to eliminate variations found in Quranic text used in state schools, and to do this they chose to preserve only one of the many readings, namely that of Hafs. According to the largest website for the content of Islamic rulings, Islam Web, the reason for the overwhelming popularity of Hafs is that it is easy to recite, so Allah has chosen it to be widespread. The link to the website is in the description below. Here is a typical picture of a Hafs Quran printed by the King Fahd printing complex in Saudi Arabia. On the inside it says in Arabic, "This Quran was written and adjusted in agreement to the narration riwayah of Hafs ibn Sulaiman." End quote. It goes on to mention who Hafs's teacher was, with a supposed chain going back to Muhammad. Here the statement, narration of Hafs, is important and needs to be borne in mind for the purpose of the rest of the video. So who was Hafs? His full name is Hafs ibn Sulaiman ibn al-Mughira al-Asadi al-Kufi. He was born in the year 90 of the Islamic calendar, or 709 AD, and he died in the year 796 AD. It is claimed that Muhammad received his first revelation in 610 AD in the cave of Hira. So Hafs's recitation of the Quran was compiled nearly 200 years later from the very first revelation, and over another 1,000 years for it to become the official Quran of the Islamic world. In terms of his character, bearing in mind that the transmission or riwayah of the Quran has to come from an unbroken chain going back to Muhammad, and it has to come from a chain of pious, learned Muslims. So Hafs's Quran version is the most read. Nearly all the major scholars of Islam claim that he was a liar, fabricator and a thief. It is for this reason anything he said in connection to Hadith, Muhammad's traditions, was rejected outright or considered da'if or weak. Many of the books and major scholars who say this are cited in Islam the Honest Truth. By way of a few examples, Ibn Hanbal called him a liar and a thief. Ad-Darimi says he is not trustworthy. Al-Bukhari in his book Tarikh al-Saghir says that he is a fabricator. Muslim ibn al-Hajjaj says he is rejected. An-Nasai says he is rejected and not trustworthy. Ibn Hibban said he was a fabricator and a thief. Ad-Darqutni said he is weak, and Bayhaqi said about any book by Hafs is thrown away due to his lies. Al-Dhahabi called him a thief. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani in his Tahdhib al-Tahdhib, Volume 2, page 21, said Hafs is a liar, he is to be wiped out for eternity. These prominent Muslim scholars said this about Hafs because he lied in making up quotes and stories about Muhammad. Therefore, anything he quoted in a hadith, it was rejected straight away. The consequences of lying against Muhammad are explained in Sahih Bukhari, Hadith 106, where Muhammad is quoted as saying, "Do not tell a lie against me, for whoever tells a lie against me, then he will surely enter the hellfire." In Sahih Muslim, Hadith number 3, Muhammad says, "Whoever lies against me intentionally, let him take his seat in the fire." Referenced in Islam the Honest Truth, the scholar An-Nawawi, commentating on Sahih Muslim and upon this hadith, says, quote, "Such a person who is a liar against the Prophet, even if they repent, are forever tarnished and never accept from him, even if that person is truthful." By way of analysis, consider the prominent Muslim scholar Ahmad ibn Hanbal in his Musnad, Hadith 1267, mentions if Hafs is in a chain of transmission, that chain becomes, and I quote, "very weak." This is indicated by the blue line. In the Arabic commentary, he mentions with an exclamation mark indicated by the green arrow the irony of Hafs, quote, "being an imam of reading Quran despite being rejected for hadith," end quote. Also, the text goes on to mention that Hafs was a thief and a fabricator, indicated by the brown lines. For example, it says, quote, "Shu'bah told me, Hafs took my book and did not return it, and he used to take people's books and wipe them," meaning in that he wiped them, and narrated hadith that he never heard as though he had heard it, end quote. It then goes on to describe Hafs as kadhaban, which means a prolific or habitual liar. This is indicated by the red arrow. Ahmad ibn Hanbal was not isolated in his view of Hafs. Many books cited in Islam the Honest Truth reports Hafs as being a liar and a thief. Books such as Du'afa Saghir, Volume 1, page 35, Al-Majruhain, Volume 1, page 255, Mizan al-I'tidal, Volume 2, page 315, At-Tahdhib At-Tahdhib, Volume 2, page 21, Al-Jar wal-Ta'dil, Volume 3, page 173, and many others. This is why no one took his testimony seriously. Apologists argue Hafs was weak only in hadith, but when it came to the Quran, he was strong. However, the scholars cited say he was not only weak, but also a liar and a thief. No matter the apologetics, it cannot be justified or excused because Hafs was accused of lying and fabricating against Muhammad's statements. Is it really believable that only when it comes to Allah's statements, the Quran, he is truthful? After all, Hafs is too unreliable a person to enter in the lesser form of Islamic literature, the Hadith. Yet, he is the main person who narrates the higher form of Islamic literature, the Quran, Allah's words. In reality, what it actually means is that by Hafs being in the transmission chain of narrating the Quran itself becomes a weak or da'if source of literature. Therefore, no Muslim could ever say that the Quran has a transmission chain that is sahih or authentic, as Hafs's very name in a hadith transmission chain makes it weak. It stands to reason, according to the very standards of Islamic scholarship, for textual authentication and criticism that the Quran comes from a weak source and therefore should be rejected. What about Hafs's teacher Asim? His full name was Asim ibn Abi Nujud al-Asadi. He was also Hafs's father-in-law. Unfortunately, he too was considered a liar. The great Islamic scholar Yahya al-Qattan said he was weak in memorizing and that he makes mistakes and fabricates. This is found in Al-Mizan al-I'tidal, volume 4, page 13, where al-Qattan adds, quote, Asim is a bad memorizer, end quote. Ahmad ibn Hanbal in his Musnad, volume 3, page 227 said he was not trustworthy, and Nasai said he was not a Hafiz, memorizer of the Quran. In the Siyar and A'lam and Nubala, Ad-Darqutni says in his recitation was a problem, fi shay, and was a bad memorizer. Not only was there a problem with his memorizing ability, but also in his trustworthiness. It says in Al-Mizan al-I'tidal, volume 4, page 13 by Al-Dhahabi, Asim was not trustworthy. On the same page, it says when Asim's name appears in a hadith chain, such as that of At-Tirmidhi hadith 396, the hadith is weak and rejected simply by his name being in the chain of narration. Similar to his student and son-in-law Hafs, no one accepted his hadith either due to his bad memory or unreliability, which is why An-Nasai and Al-Qutni, Al-Bukhari, Muslim al-Hajjaj, and many other well-known hadith compilers did not accept both their testimonies. In At-Taghrib At-Tahdhib, volume 1, page 455, Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani says, Asim was deluded, waham. A legitimate question is, why do some countries and mosques ban Qurans if there is supposed to be only one Arabic Quran, or if their differences are so minute it does not really affect the overall meaning? The reality is there is a problem from which the source of the Quran comes from, that the differences in the Arabic Qurans are significant, and depending on the region, one of the Quran versions are banned over another. The Hafs Quran is not allowed to be read in Morocco in congregational prayers within mosques and other parts of North Africa. For example, in An-Nahar, 25th of January 2013, is an article that says Algeria prohibits Hafs Quran recited in its mosques. Conversely, in At-Tawassul, 6th of April 2016, is an article that says Saudi Arabia prohibits its imams to recite the Quran other than Hafs version at all its mosques. The links for the articles are provided. As an illustration, consider some of the differences between Hafs and other versions. Between Hafs and Asusi versions, there are different pronouns used in Quran 2:271. In Hafs it says, He will expiate from you sins, yukaffiru. In Asusi it says, We will expiate from you sins, nukaffiru. In Hafs there is a grammatical error that is not in the Ru version of Quran 2:48, with the word be accepted in the masculine form in Hafs, yuqbalu. The actual word should be in the feminine form, tuqbalu, found in the Ru version, due to it corresponding to the feminine word shafa'a, intercession. When Hafs is compared to Aduri, there is a completely different word used in Quran 2:219. In Hafs it says big, kabir. In Aduri it says lot, kathir. When Hafs is compared to Al-Bazi, there are different verbs used in Hafs, Quran 3:146. It says fought in the active tense, qatala, whereas in Al-Bazi it says was killed in the passive tense, qutila. There are completely different words used in Hafs Quran 43:19 when compared to Hisham. In Hafs it says servants, ibad. In Hisham it is in the presence of, inda. There are variations in text from a statement to command in Quran 21:4. In the Hafs it says, he said, qala, composed by adding an additional letter in the text, whereas in the Warsh it says, qul, say. In addition to different words, the Hafs Quran has 6,236 verses, whereas in the Warsh Quran it has 6,214 verses. On the point about verse numbers, there are those who seek to find numerical patterns from Quranic verses and chapters. However, the original Quran manuscripts had no numbering of verses or chapter numbers. The numbering system does not necessarily mean different Qurans, but it does affect those modern-day apologists who use numbers to attach miracles to the Quran. Please note, in all these verses and examples cited, it is the same verse, but in its original Arabic different words are used, thus creating different meanings and theological implications. As seen in the last example, even the original manuscript is tampered with by adding or removing a letter to create different meanings. These are just a few examples in the many Arabic Qurans that are available today, of which there are thousands of textual variants. Here are only a few examples to show how the Hafs Quran differs from the Warsh Quran, the two most prevalent Arabic Qurans recited today, with Hafs accounting for approximately 97%, whereas Warsh accounts for around 2% of the world's Muslims, and 1% is shared by various other Quran recitations. Quran verse 2132 in the Hafs, it says, وَوَصَّى, and Ibrahim enjoined on his sons. In the Warsh, وَأَوْصَى, and Ibrahim instructed or made his sons. The difference is that the Hafs version is a second form verb, while the Warsh version had an extra alif to make a fourth form verb. This intensifies the meaning of the verb. Quran verse 3133 in the Hafs, وَسَارِعُوا, and hasten to. In the Warsh, سَارِعُوا, hasten to. The Hafs version has the extra word wow, and. This does not change the meaning of the verse, but it does add an extra word to the verse. Quran verse 91:15 in the Hafs, وَلَا يَخَافُ, and for him is no fear. In the Warsh, فَلَا يَخَافُ, therefore for him is no fear. There are different letters at the beginning of these words. This changes the connection from and to therefore. Quran verse 258, نَغْفِرْ, we give mercy. In the Warsh, يُغْفَرْ, he gives mercy. There are different letters at the beginning of these words. This difference changes the meaning from we to he, also an active to passive difference. Quran 2140, تَقُولُونَ, you plural say. In the Hafs. In the Warsh, يَقُولُونَ, they say. There are different letters at the beginning of these words. This difference changes the meaning from you to they. Quran 210, يَكْذِبُونَ, they lie. In the Warsh, يُكَذِّبُونَ, they will lie to or they deny. There are different vowels on the first and second letters of these words. The Hafs version is a first form of the verb, while the Warsh version is a second form verb which changes the meaning. Quran 2259 in the Hafs, نُنْشِزُهَا, we shall raise up. In the Warsh, نُنْشِرُهَا, we shall revive or make alive. There are different root letters in these words, and this makes two different words. The two words have a similar meaning but are not identical. Quran 381 in the Hafs, آتَيْتُكُمْ, I gave you. In the Warsh, آتَيْنَاكُمْ, we gave you. There are different letters in the middle of these words. This difference changes the meaning from I to we. Quran 4152, يُؤْتِيهِمْ, in the Hafs. In the Warsh, نُؤْتِيهِمُ, we gave them. There are different letters at the beginning of these words. This difference changes the meaning from we to he. Quran 2:9. In the Hafs, يَخْدَعُونَ, they deceive. In the Warsh, يُخَادِعُونَ, they seek to deceive. The Hafs version is a first form of the verb, whilst the Warsh version is a third formed by having an extra letter in the verb, which changes the meaning. Quran 2:184 in the Hafs, Ta'amu Miskin, feeding a poor man. In the Welsh, Ta'ami Masakina, feeding poor men. There are several different vowels in these words. This changes the noun from singular to plural. It also changes the number of people required to feed in order to redeem oneself for failing to fast. Quran 28:48 in the Hafs, Siharani, 2 works of magic. In the Welsh, Sahirani, 2 magicians. There are different vowels on the first 2 letters of these words. This changes the word from an active participle in the Hafs version to a dual noun in the Welsh. To say it is only a small difference in a word, but the basic original word pattern or meaning is the same, is not a sufficient argument, as in the Arabic these small differences can make a huge difference, as it is not only in the pronunciation where there is a difference, nor a different understanding of a sentence, but also in its application. This has already been alluded to in the previous slide for Quran 2:184. As an illustration, consider Quran 2:222. Although the word is the same, however, depending on whether vowels are put and how it is read, it has multiple meanings and vastly different outcomes. For example, there is a difference of reading regarding the word yathun, as it is found in the Hafs Quran version, but it can also be read as yathan due to no vowelization or diacritical markings in the early script. If read as yathun, it means that it is possible to have intercourse with the wife after her menses have ceased, before she has taken a ritual bath. If read as yathan, it means that intercourse with her is not permissible before she takes the bath. The word is read as yattahan in the Khalaf, Shu'bah and other Quran versions, which means until they are both clean through a ritual bath. These differences in recitation had major theological implications, so a group of jurists belonging to different schools of Islamic law, including Abu Hanifa and his followers, have given their legal ruling according to the first reading. Another group, including Malik, Shafi and Ahmed ibn Hanbal, have given their ruling in accordance with the second reading. A third viewpoint is found, to which tahara or ritual cleanliness from the verse is taken to mean washing clean of the bloody locale, not necessarily a bath. Among them are Ahmed Abdurrahman al-Awza'i, the founder of the Awza'i school of law, and Ibn Hazm, the second-ranking leader of the Zahiri school. The reason for the divergence of views between the jurists is due to the fact that the word tahor, or purity, in this word is used in all the 3 meanings in the Arabic tongue. Note, all this has come from the same Quran, same original word, however, depending on the diacritics and pronunciation, different rulings are derived. So the conclusion: how can over 97% of worldwide Muslims put themselves in such a position and reconcile the fact that Hafs is the narrator of the most popular recitation of the Quran today, when their own scholars have spoken so vociferously against him in such strong terms? Surely God's word cannot rest on a chain weakened by the likes of Hafs or Asim. When it comes to Hadith literature, Muslims pride themselves on authenticated chains of narration, yet when it comes to the primary source, the Quran, it comes from weak transmission sources such as Asim and Hafs. The explanation that Asim and Hafs were only unreliable in the field of Hadith, yet fully trustworthy in the field of transmitting the recitation of the Quran, is problematic and irrational on so many fronts, because they are still admitting that these 2 individuals were still considered unreliable in the lesser form of transmission, namely Hadith, but are trustworthy in the higher form, the Quran. Secondly, it does not explain that Asim was considered untrustworthy and his student and son-in-law Hafs as a liar, thief and fabricator. It is illogical to suggest that these are the very same people who are rejected in narrating hadith because they lied against Muhammad, yet they are truthful and accepted when it comes to the Quran, as they never lie against Allah. A question that must be answered is, how can a source of salvation ever be taken from anyone accused of lying, theft, unreliability, delusion and untrustworthiness? Finally, there are significant differences between different Arabic Qurans. This has caused theological implications and disagreements, not to mention one version of the Arabic Quran being banned in some countries in favour of another.